Welcome to Owl Stories. Tonight's tales are here to keep you company as you drift into sleep. So put on your headphones, get cozy in bed, and turn the lights off. This video has a black screen and no ads, just uninterrupted storytelling. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to Owl Stories, like the video, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from now. Let's begin. The glow of computer screens cast a bluish light across Nicole's small bedroom. The quiet hum of her PC was the only sound breaking the silence of the late-night hour. She was scrolling through messages on a Discord server she had been a part of for months. One of those obscure communities where people shared mysterious, unexplained, and sometimes disturbing content. Usually, it was just rumors, pranks, or urban legends. But tonight, something felt different. A new message had appeared from a user named Menas. At first glance, it seemed innocuous, just another post in the sea of chatter. But then Nicole's eyes caught the image attached. It was a photograph of a person in a dimly lit room, but there was something off about it. The person looked completely still, too still. There was a precision in the framing, a deliberate care in the composition that suggested this was just a casual photo. The caption read simply, "Step 1 complete." Nicole's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She had seen Menas post strange things before, often joking or trolling other members. But this felt different. For the next hour, Nicole and the other members debated in real time. Some laughed it off, accusing Menas of creating another elaborate trolling story. "Look at him," one member typed, "he just wants attention." It's classic Menas, but others weren't so sure. There was something hyper-specific about the photograph. Nicole, curious and uneasy, decided to run it through a reverse image search. Nothing, no matches, not on Google, not on social media, nowhere. It started a quiet division within the Discord server. Half the members dismissed Menas as a troll, a liar with too much free time. The other half, though, began to suspect something far more sinister. And Nicole, though she wanted to believe it was a joke, couldn't shake the feeling that it was real. She went back to the server, scrolling through Menas' previous posts. Patterns emerged. Menas often mentioned the times he would be online, the breaks he'd take for classes or studying. Every single timestamp was given in Eastern Standard Time. Nicole whispered to herself, "Okay, Eastern Time. That narrows it down maybe." The Discord server wasn't just a place to chat, it had its detectives. A small group of members decided to investigate. They started compiling every piece of information Menas had ever posted. Phrases, photos, times, even background details in his posts. First, they discovered something crucial. In a seemingly throwaway message, Menas had revealed his first name was actually Menas. No alias, no username trick, just Menas. "That's rare," one member said. "Not a common name. If we can figure out where this name is common, maybe we can triangulate him." Then came the time zones, and finally, the IP tracking. One of the server members, experienced in networking, volunteered to trace Menas' IP address. After a tense 20 minutes, it was traced to Toronto, Canada. Nicole's stomach tightened. Toronto. That's real, this isn't just a joke. Despite having an approximate location, contacting the authorities was complicated. The police were skeptical. It could be a VPN, they said. It could be anyone, anywhere. You don't have concrete proof. But Nicole and her group felt a gnawing urgency. The images Menas posted weren't just odd, they were specific steps in some plan. A 4-step plan that, judging by the photos, was escalating. The second photograph arrived hours later. Nicole stared at it for what felt like forever. Step 2 complete. There was no ambiguity, this wasn't a staged joke. Mina's posts became more unnerving, more precise. By the third image, Nicole couldn't deny it. Her hands trembled as she typed to the group, "This is real. He's actually doing it. We have to stop him." But stopping him wasn't simple. With only an IP address that could easily be masked by a VPN, no physical description, and no concrete evidence beyond the images themselves, they were powerless. The clock was ticking, and Nicole could feel her anxiety mounting. Discord messages flew across the server. Half were begging Menas to come clean, to admit it was a joke. Half were desperately trying to figure out if law enforcement could be alerted in time. And then it happened, the fourth image, step 4 complete. Nicole stared at the screen, the image blurring through her tears. Mina's plan was finished. There was no way to ignore it now. The following day, officers from Toronto arrived. They knocked on the door of a small house in a quiet suburb just north of downtown. Menas opened the door, calm, neutral, almost serene. "Can we come in?" an officer asked. "Ya will see," Menas replied. Inside, it was a chilling scene. Menas had executed the plan with meticulous care. The police, trained to confront violence, stood frozen. For years, Menas had maintained a double life. To friends and family, he was a studious engineering student on the path to success. In reality, he dropped out his first year, spent afternoons at the local mall, and evenings immersed in video games. No one suspected, until now. Menas was arrested and later pleaded guilty to 4 counts of murder each, corresponding to the steps of his plan. The sentence, life in prison, with eligibility for parole after 40 years. For Nicole and the Discord community, the aftermath was haunting. They had witnessed the planning unfold in real time, powerless to intervene. Messages and images that had seemed like harmless trolling were in fact documentation of horror. Nicole closed her laptop and leaned back, shaking. The glow of the screen faded, leaving her in silence. The lesson was clear. Even behind a username, even behind the anonymity of a screen, real danger can exist. The Discord server went quiet for months afterward. Some left, unable to continue. Some stayed, driven by the unresolved horror of what they had witnessed. And Nicole, she never forgot. The memory of Mina's fourth-step plan and the images that accompanied it would linger, a stark reminder that sometimes the darkest stories unfold not in fiction, but in real life. In the aftermath, Nicole often reflected on a simple, terrifying truth. Vigilance is only useful when combined with action. Observation without intervention can be complicit, and online anonymity, while empowering, can sometimes conceal unspeakable evil. As she typed one final message into the Discord server before logging off, she wrote, "Remember, trust your instincts. Sometimes a troll is just a troll, but sometimes a troll is real." The screen went dark, and for Nicole, the memory of Mina's fourth-step plan would never fade. The sky was still dark, the kind of dark that feels almost alive, swallowing the world in shadows. It was 4:45 a.m. on a Saturday morning, January 17, 2015, and Caleb Whitby was behind the wheel of his old pickup truck. The road ahead stretched like a black ribbon through the thick fog and ice. Every so often, headlights of passing cars appeared and disappeared like ghostly eyes. The chill in the air seeped through the truck's cabin despite the heater running at full blast. Caleb's family farm relied on him that morning. He had to pick up a shipment of cattle, and delay wasn't an option. The icy patches glinted under the faint morning light as he gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The semi-truck ahead of him crawled along the road, far under the speed limit, a lumbering beast blocking the narrow lane. Frustration bubbled in Caleb's chest. He needed to pass it, to get moving, but there was a sharp turn ahead. No room, no time, not safely. Hesitating, he eased back on the throttle, his mind racing with calculations, distance, speed, traction, the possibility of sliding into the icy ditch. He made the turn, hoping the road would clear. That's when he saw it. Something was wrong, something was off. Ahead, through the thick morning fog, a scene so terrifying it seemed unreal, a massive pileup, cars crumpled into each other like paper, metal twisted grotesquely. Smoke and steam rose from engines, the faint sound of alarms echoed through the cold air. Caleb's heart slammed in his chest. Reflexively, he slammed on the brakes, the truck skidded, tires screeched, the icy road had no mercy. He tried to steer, to regain control, but the world seemed to tilt violently around him. A loud crunching sound shattered the morning silence as his truck collided with the semi-truck he had been trailing. And then, worse, a semi behind him couldn't stop in time. Another deafening crash. Caleb's pickup was trapped between these massive machines, crushed in a way that should have been fatal. For a moment silence reigned. Caleb couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could barely think. Then came another sound, the heavy, dragging movement of metal as yet another semi-truck approached the scene. But something extraordinary had happened. By some impossible alignment of physics, the collisions had created a tiny pocket of spacia hollow, just big enough for Caleb to remain alive, shielded from the deadly crush around him. Somewhere in the chaos, a semi-truck driver had managed to stop, carefully navigating through the wreckage. From his vantage point, he could see the tiny space where Caleb was trapped. With incredible caution, he maneuvered closer, assessed the situation, and pulled him out. Caleb emerged with only bruises and cuts, a miracle that defied reason. As first responders arrived, the full extent of the wreck became clear. Over 24 vehicles were involved, yet remarkably, there were no fatalities. The chaos had been immense: twisted metal, shattered glass, vehicles stacked like dominoes, but everyone had survived. Caleb sat in an ambulance, the hum of the heater and the faint voices of paramedics washing over him. He was alive, unscathed. The sheer improbability of his survival began to sink in. Every second of hesitation, every decision, every reflex had contributed to this narrow escape. The story of Caleb Whitby's morning is not just one of luck. It's a study in human instinct, the razor-thin margin between life and death. The split-second decision to brake, the realization of the turn ahead, the inability to pass too soon, each action intertwined with fate in a tapestry of chaos and survival. Psychologists studying near-death experience often cite the role of heightened focus under stress. Caleb's mind, reacting to the unfolding disaster, processed danger in a way that perhaps saved him. He had no time to panic. Panic would have killed him. Instead, his body responded almost automatically to the immediate threats. Braking, bracing, conserving his body in the tiny space that would become his lifeline. News of the pileup spread quickly across local channels. Neighbors, family, and the wider community marveled at the sheer improbability of Caleb's survival. Reporters interviewed the other drivers who had witnessed the chaos. One semi-truck driver described seeing Caleb's truck crumpled, his body impossibly intact within the wreckage, and the image haunted him for weeks afterward. For Caleb, returning home to the farm after such a near-death experience brought a mix of gratitude and lingering fear. He recounted the story to his parents, friends, and later to anyone who would listen, not as a tale of heroism, but as a sober reminder of the thin line between life and death on icy winter roads. Months later, Caleb reflected on that morning. He understood the randomness of survival. One small decision waiting to pass the semi-truck, braking a second too late, choosing a line through the icy patch could have changed everything. He also realized the unseen acts of others mattered. The driver who managed to navigate his semi safely, the emergency responders who coordinated the aftermath. Safety protocols, split-second reactions, luck, and human resilience all intersected in a moment that could easily have ended in tragedy. And yet, somehow, it didn't. Caleb's story became a cautionary tale for drivers across Oregon. It was shared in driver safety courses, in community meetings, and in local news segments. Not because it was sensational, but because it illustrated the fragile nature of life. and the incredible, almost supernatural ways in which survival can manifest in the face of overwhelming odds. Years later, Caleb would drive the same stretch of highway, winter mornings crisp and foggy, icy patches glinting under headlights. He approached each curve with respect, each turn a reminder of that frozen morning when fate had chosen to spare him. He thought of the drivers, the trucks, the tiny space that became his shield, and he silently thanked the universe, or whatever force had guided him, that he had walked away. The highway remained the same, treacherous and indifferent, yet Caleb walked away from that day with a profound understanding. Life can hinge on a single moment, and sometimes survival is a miracle, stitched together by instinct, circumstance, and pure, unexplainable luck. The North Sea in September is a place where the sky meets the horizon in a swirl of gray, where cold winds whip across the deck, and waves crash against the hull with the power of a living beast. On this morning, aboard a large dive ship, the air was electric with tension. 12 highly trained saturation divers were preparing for a routine dive, but the sea has a way of turning routine into peril in the blink of an eye. Chris Lemons, 32 years old, checked his equipment methodically. Every valve, every hose, every seal was scrutinized. He had been a saturation diver for years, and he knew better than anyone that at 330 feet below the surface, mistakes were not tolerated. The dive would be straightforward, or so they thought. Chris and 2 colleagues, Dave and Duncan, were assigned to perform maintenance on an oil platform that had withstood decades of harsh North Sea conditions. The platform jutted like a steel skeleton from the waves, an industrial monolith standing in the relentless gray of the ocean. Saturation diving is one of the most dangerous jobs on the planet. These divers live under immense pressure for weeks at a time. At 330 feet, the pressure is more than 10 times that at the surface. Breathing the wrong gases, ascending too quickly, or skipping decompression stops could be fatal. Divers rely on a complex system of pressurized living chambers on the ship and a dive bella small mobile capsule that takes them from the chamber to the seafloor so that they remain under controlled pressure. Inside the dive bell, the world is silent except for the hum of life support systems. Outside, the water is pitch black, cold, and incomprehensibly deep. Divers rely entirely on their umbilicals, long cables that supply air, heat, electricity for lights, and radio communication with the surface. Without them, a diver is isolated in a hostile abyss. Chris, Dave, and Duncan moved from the living chamber to the dive bell. Duncan would remain inside, acting as bellman, coordinating the operations. Chris and Dave prepared their helmets, checked connections, and mentally rehearsed every motion. The dive bell detached from the ship and descended through a hole in the hull into the dark, frigid water. As the bell reached 330 feet, the ocean seemed to swallow all light, all sound, all sense of orientation. Chris opened the hatch at the bottom, allowing him to step into the void. He plunged into blackness. The platform loomed above, 11 meters tall, a steel monolith that had become their workplace, their challenge, and, unknowingly, the center of their imminent crisis. Initially, everything went smoothly. Chris and Dave navigated the platform's steel beams, performing inspections and minor repairs. The mission was routine, expected to last about 6 hours. The rhythm of the work, the familiarity of the tasks, and the camaraderie of the divers created a deceptive sense of security. But beneath the calm, a technological heartbeat pulsed aboard the ship, the dynamic positioning system. This computer-controlled mechanism kept the vessel steady despite the North Sea's fury, ensuring the dive bell stayed in exact alignment with the platform. Without it, the divers would be at the mercy of currents and wind. An alarm sounded on the bridge, The dynamic positioning system had failed. Immediately, the backup system also failed. The ship began to drift. Above the waves, the crew scrambled, trying to regain control. Below, Chris and Dave had no way of knowing that the world above was descending into chaos. The umbilicals connecting them to the surface grew taut as the bell began to be dragged along with the drifting ship. Chris' umbilical snagged on a steel pylon. Tension built. Every pull, every inch, threatened disaster. "Duncan," Chris shouted through the radio, "I can't get it free. There's no more slack." Duncan's voice was tense, strained. "You have to free it yourself." Chris tugged, twisted, and maneuvered, but the steel held firm. Then it happened, the umbilical snapped. In an instant, Chris was isolated. No lights, no radio, no direct air supply. Only the cold, crushing darkness surrounded him. Chris fell backward into the black water, sinking toward the seafloor. Panic would have been natural, yet training took over. He activated his limited backup air supply, providing just 5 to 6 minutes of breathable oxygen. The water was near freezing, shocking his body, slowing his reflexes and metabolism, a tiny mercy in a hostile environment. He had to find the platform. Without orientation, without light, every step was a gamble. A wrong move could send him tumbling down a cliff of steel or disappearing into the abyss. Yet Chris chose a direction, inching forward in the freezing darkness, relying on instinct, memory, and the faint echo of the bell above. On the ship, the captain realized the critical nature of the situation. A remotely operated vehicle, ROV, was launched. A mechanical eye to seek out Chris in the black water. Crew members watched the live feed, hearts racing as the ROV navigated the dark expanse. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, through the camera's night vision, the silhouette of the platform appeared. On the top, motionless, lay Chris. He had found the structure miraculously, but without air, he was on the brink of death. In a desperate maneuver, the captain powered down and restarted the ship's dynamic positioning system, a last-ditch move that was dangerous in rough seas. The gamble worked. The ship returned over Chris' position. Dave, already in the bell, leapt from the platform, guided by the ROV video feed. He reached Chris, dragging him toward the bell. Duncan removed Chris' helmet and administered mouth-to-mouth. Life returned to Chris' face. His color came back. The impossible had happened. Over 30 minutes without primary air supply, in freezing, pitch-black water, Chris survived. Scientists speculate that the cold slowed his heart and brain, extending survival against all odds. Chris would return to saturation diving 3 weeks later, a living testament to human endurance, training, and luck. Chris Lemon's survival is studied in diving schools, psychology programs, and emergence response training. It illustrates the razor-thin line between life and death in extreme professions, the power of human instinct under pressure, and the unpredictable mercy of circumstance. Every dive after that day was approached with solemn respect. The North Sea had claimed near misses, broken machines, and shattered nerves, but Chris had emerged from the abyss, a reminder that preparation, skill, and courage sometimes meet miracles head-on. Years later, Chris recounts the dive not with pride, but with reverence. He remembers the freezing pressure, the black void, the silence, and the terrifying freedom of being untethered. He remembers the ROV, the crew, and the leap from the platform that returned him to life. In the end, Chris' story is more than survival. It is a meditation on risk, courage, and the fragile, miraculous thread by which life persists in the harshest of places. It was a crisp February morning in Cape Town, South Africa. Sunlight filtered through the slats of blinds, painting faint stripes across the kitchen floor of a small suburban home. 17-year-old Misha Solomon was sitting at the breakfast table, half-heartedly nibbling at her toast, while scribbling the last notes of her homework. Her mother, Lana, emerged from the sewing room carrying a dress like a precious treasure. It was a flowing red gown, hand-stitched over the past several days. Miss Ha's eyes lit up immediately, the excitement of a school dance bubbling to the surface. "That's beautiful, Mom," she said, her voice bright with genuine awe. She reached out to touch the fabric, feeling the fine stitching, the silky texture. Lana smiled proudly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Miss Ha's face. But behind the warmth, there was a calculated, common, almost imperceptible tension that hinted this morning was not ordinary. "Dad," Misha asked, glancing at her father seated at the table. Her father grunted. "Isn't that dress a little revealing?" His voice was teasing, protective, but it carried the weight of years of unchallenged authority. Misha rolled her eyes, offering the typical teenage reassurance. "It's fine, Dad." "Really?" she said, giving him a quick hug before returning to her breakfast. Miss Ha's aunt was waiting in the car to drive her to school. The morning air smelled of sun, baked asphalt, and exhaust fumes as they merged onto the quiet streets of Cape Town. At first, everything seemed normal, but her aunt kept glancing at the rear-view mirror, eyes narrowing. "Misha, do you see that white car behind us?" she asked, voice tinged with unease. Misha looked, squinting against the sunlight. The street was busy, cars moving in and out of view. "I think you're just being paranoid," she said with a shrug. "There's nothing unusual." Her aunt's face remained tight, a silent warning that Misha couldn't quite interpret. Little did she know, the white car was not paranoia. It was surveillance. Detectives had been quietly watching Misha, waiting for the perfect moment to confirm what they suspected, that she was not who she thought she was. Once at school, Misha hurried down the hall toward her first class. Her best friend, Zephanie Nurse, appeared in the distance. Normally, their encounters were full of laughter, teasing, and whispered secrets. But Cassidy gave a strange, lukewarm smile and bolted past her. Misha stopped, confusion clouding her mind. Cassidy had always been reliable, warm, and protective. Why the sudden distance? She shook her head, blaming nerves or a busy schedule. But deep down, she felt the first prickles of unease. The school bell rang, snapping her back to reality. She had to reach her class, her thoughts racing but anchored by routine. Halfway through the lesson, the principal arrived without warning. "Misha, come with me," she said firmly. Gasps filled the classroom. Misha's stomach sank. She had no idea why this was happening. Following the principal, she was led down a series of corridors to a small office where two serious-looking women waited. No introductions, no explanations, just the instruction to sit. "Misha," one of the women said plainly, "we're here because of a photo." Confused, Misha asked, "What photo?" The women explained patiently and deliberately that this photo, one she had taken with Cassidy, had sparked an investigation. At first, Misha didn't understand. It seemed absurd. A photograph? How could something so ordinary unravel everything she thought she knew about her life? Misha was escorted, under the watch of the social workers, to a medical clinic. The procedure was quick, a simple DNA test. Yet the weight of its significance was crushing. Hours later, the call came. The results confirmed the impossible. Misha Solomon was not Misha Solomon. Her real name was Zephanie Nurse. 17 years earlier, she had been abducted from a hospital crib in Cape Town. The woman she called Mom, Lana Solomon, had kidnapped her. Misha felt the floor shift beneath her. Everything she had known, every warm hug, every shared memory, was now tangled with betrayal. And yet, the detectives explained gently. Her biological parents were still alive. They were waiting to meet her. Walking into the police station felt surreal. Zephanie gripped the social worker's arm as though it was the only anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The door opened, and there they were, Cassidy's parents, her biological mother and father. Tears streamed down their faces as they rushed to embrace her. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Zephanie's mind swirled with disbelief. She had known Cassidy as a best friend, a confidant, but now she realized Cassidy was her sister. The uncanny similarities, their shared sense of humor, the bond that had drawn them towards it was all explained. The photo that had sparked the investigation became a key piece of evidence. Cassidy had innocently shown it to her parents. Recognizing the resemblance, they brought it to the authorities. The police, following careful procedure, monitored Zephanie without alerting her to ensure the kidnapped girl could be safely recovered. Cassidy's recent distant behavior now made sense. Had been trying to comply with police instructions, ensuring Zephanie would not be tipped off. Every awkward glance, every sudden retreat was a silent act of protection. Lana Solomon, the kidnapper, was arrested and later convicted, sentenced to 10 years in prison. Zephanie, now reunited with her biological family, maintained contact with the Solomons, acknowledging the complex love and care they had provided throughout her childhood. Despite the upheaval, Zephanie chose to continue using the name Misha, a nod to the life she had lived and the identity she had grown into. Zephanie's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Abduction, deception, and years of uncertainty could not break her. Her reunion with her sister, Cassidy, and the careful orchestration of her recovery demonstrate the power of meticulous investigation, intuition, and hope. Through the chaos and confusion, one truth remained. Identity is not merely a name, a document, or a home. It is the bond shared with those who truly care, and sometimes the universe conspires to bring the lost back to those who have been waiting. New York City, the lifeblood of America, a place that never sleeps, where the rhythm of footsteps, honking cabs, and rumbling subways weave together into a restless song of survival. It was the evening rush hour on December 3, 2012. The air above ground was crisp, biting at the skin with winter's sharp teeth. But below the surface, in the underground arteries of Manhattan, the air was heavy and damp, carrying the metallic tang of rails and the faint odor of old newspapers and coffee. Photographer Umar Abasi descended the steps into the 49th Street station, a camera slung casually around his neck. To him, this was a normal night, just another subway ride through a city teeming with a million unfolding dramas. He had no way of knowing that within minutes, he would find himself standing in the middle of one of the most horrifying and controversial moments ever captured in New York's subway system. The platform was crowded. Commuters shifted impatiently, staring at the glowing lights of their phones, listening for the distant roar of the next train. There was a man leaning against a pillar, rubbing his temples as if the day had drained the very soul from him. Another fiddled with shopping bags stuffed with Christmas gifts, his eyes scanning the tracks nervously, as if every arriving train carried both relief and threat. Among the crowd stood Kai Sukhan, a 58-year-old father and husband. His day had been long and troubled. He carried himself with the weary posture of someone weighted down by more than shopping bags, by invisible burdens, arguments, and regrets. Nearby, another man lingered named Davis, tall, imposing, with a restless energy that seemed to hum beneath his skin. The two men had never met, but within minutes, their paths would violently collide. Witnesses later recalled that it started with words, sharp, jagged words, that sliced through the dull murmur of the platform. Han and Davis were suddenly face to face, voices raised, tempers flaring. Nobody knew what sparked it. Some said Han had been drinking. Others believed Davis was already on edge, paranoid, quick to anger. Their argument escalated, echoing off the tiled walls. Commuters stepped back, unsure whether to intervene. In New York, people learn quickly that stepping into someone else's fight can backfire. The unspoken rule is to watch from a safe distance, to let chaos burn itself out. But this chaos wasn't going to burn out, it was about to ignite. In an instant, Davis shoved Han with both hands. The crowd gasped as Han stumbled backward. His heel caught the edge of the platform. Time slowed, arms flailed. And then silence, shattered by the sickening thud of a body hitting the tracks. Han was on the rails. The rumble of an approaching train grew louder. vibrating through the steel beneath him. Panic rippled across the platform. Some screamed, others froze. A few tried to move toward him, but hesitation gripped them, the terrible realization that the train was too close, the seconds too few. And in that frozen sea of humanity stood Umar Abasi, camera in hand. Abasi later explained that he did not raise his camera to capture death. He raised it to save a life. His idea, desperate and instinctual, was to use the powerful flash of his camera to warn the oncoming train conductor. Each burst of light cracked against the dark tunnel like lightning, desperate signals of alarm, but as the flashes went off, others on the platform misunderstood. To them, it looked like a man documenting a tragedy, framing horror as it unfolded, prioritizing his shot over human life. That perception would later ignite a firestorm of controversy that still burns online today. On the tracks, hands scrambled to climb back up, fingers clawing at the platform's edge. But panic makes the body clumsy, and exhaustion makes it weak. The oncoming train bore down, its headlights cutting through the tunnel. Witnesses shouted, their voices blending into a chaotic roar. The conductor saw movement, but had no time. Brakes screeched, sparks flew, and the metal beast thundered forward. Impact, the platform shook, and then silence. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Passengers covered their mouths, some crying, others paralyzed. A few clutched their children tighter, as if shielding them from the brutal reality they had just witnessed. Han lay motionless. The train had struck him. His life had ended instantly, in front of dozens of horrified witnesses. And yet, the aftermath was not only about tragedy, it became about blame. Abasi's photos, snapped in desperation, were later published on the front page of the New York Post. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Doomed." Public outrage exploded. Many accused him of choosing to take photos instead of physically helping Han off the tracks. Social media crucified him. Why didn't you pull him up? Why didn't you try? The questions multiplied, venomous and unrelenting. Abasi defended himself. He insisted he had been too far away, that there wasn't enough time to reach Han before the train struck, and that the flashes were a last-ditch effort to alert the conductor. But public perception is rarely merciful. To many, he would forever be the man who photographed death. Meanwhile, named Davis, the man who had pushed Han, was arrested within days. His defense claimed self-defense, insisting Han had been aggressive, drunk, and had initiated the confrontation. But eyewitness is told a different story, that Davis had escalated, that the push was deliberate, that he had chosen violence. In 2017, after years of proceedings, Davis was convicted of manslaughter and assault. His sentence, 20 years to life in prison. Justice, in a legal sense, had been served, but the moral questions lingered. The tragedy at 49th Street Rays is haunting questions. In moments of crisis, why do some freeze? Why do others film? And why is it so easy to assign blame from a safe distance, after the fact? Psychologists call it the bystander effect, the paradox that the more people witness a tragedy, the less likely any one person is to intervene. In that subway station, dozens of eyes saw Han fall. Dozens of minds processed the terror, but only one man, Umar Abasi, acted though his action was misunderstood. Was it enough? Was it the wrong choice? Or was it simply the desperate instinct of a man caught in a nightmare? The New York subway is more than a transit system. It's a mirror of the city itself. Chaotic, unpredictable, alive with stories of survival and tragedy. For every train that arrives safely, there's a story of someone who almost didn't make it, of someone who froze, of someone who acted too late. On December 3, 2012, the subway became the stage for a tragedy that still resonates. A man lost his life. Another man lost his freedom. And a photographer, forever tied to the moment, lost his reputation. In the end, the incident reminds us of a chilling truth. In life's most critical moments, sometimes there are no heroes. Only humans flawed, frightened, and desperately trying to make sense of the chaos around them. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. 5 stories, 5 very different people. But if you look closely, you'll notice that each story shares the same haunting thread: ordinary moments that turned into extraordinary nightmares. Menas, the student who built a 4-step plan that no one believed until it was too late. Whitby, the farmer whose ordinary drive through icy Oregon became a brush with death and a miracle of survival. Chris Lemons, the diver who slipped into a black underwater graveyard and somehow cheated death against all odds. Zephanie Nurse, the girl who lived her entire life under a stolen name, only to have her true identity revealed in the most shocking way. And finally, Umar Abasi, the photographer whose split-second decision in a subway station left the world asking impossible questions about fear, morality, and responsibility. Each one of these stories reminds us of something we'd rather forget. Life doesn't ask permission before change is everything. 1 second you're driving home, riding the subway, going to school, or just living your routine, and in the next second, your world is upside down. Now, I want to hear from you. Which one of these stories struck you the hardest? Was it Menas, his horrifying secret life, Caleb's unbelievable survival, Chris' fight against the ocean, Zephanie's stolen childhood, or the haunting moral dilemma of Umar Abasi? Let me know in the comments. And remember, if you enjoyed today's episode and you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story form, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do. And we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please sneak into the like button's house, put on a trench coat, and whisper cryptic warnings about the incident until they can't sleep at night. Also, subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.